Hello class. In this video, I'll be demonstrating how to draw a portrait using a 12 set of Premier Prismacolor pencils. I start off first with a very basic sketch of the portrait using dark brown. I find the orientation that the model is facing, where the eyes are, very basic placement, and I go about it very softly. And as you can see, I'm starting off with the nose and working my way out to the eye. I am measuring using angle measurements and proportional measurements using the facial features as my major landmarks. I'm making sure that my tear ducts are aligned, and I'm also using the spaces in between features to make sure that my facial features are aligned and make sense within the portrait. Sometimes it helps to take a step back and make sure that the portrait is accurate. I'm trying to address the portrait very general at first, and ever so slowly getting more specific with detail. Now, as you can see, I have just mapped out the shadow shapes and I have blocked them in, all using dark brown. Once I have solidified these features, I go in there with a little bit more confidence and use a little more extra pressure to delineate the darks within the portrait. I am also using my eraser to erase mistakes that I have made along the way during the construction process. Even when drawing the hair, I'm making sure that I'm going in the direction of the strands of hair. Now at this point, I am adding the white charcoal onto the portrait in the light mass. I'm starting off with the highlights in the portrait, adding more pressure to these highlights, making these highlights more intense. Now, understanding the light logic of the portrait, or of any mass for that matter, the light is coming from above, so the highlight is located towards the forehead, and you can see the light diffuse from the top of the head to the bottom where the chin is. The light is less intense towards the chin. The light is more intense in the forehead. So I would suggest that you pay close attention to the intensity of the light and how that light intensifies as you move up in the figure or the portrait. Now, just using the dark brown, I am going in with a little bit more pressure. I'm also making sure that I keep a very sharp point in order to cover the surface of the paper and make sure that I fill in the tooth of the paper with enough pigment in order to make that change in the surface. Now, as you can see, I'm adding more details in the portrait. Even in this base layer, as I call it, using dark brown and white. This base coat layer very closely resembles an underpainting if it were a portrait done in oil. Now I am moving on to the color layers, starting off with sienna brown. I am then adding warmer tones such as orange, and I'm covering it with white. I'm also using complementary colors in shadow areas such as violet, and also going in with black in darker areas very sparingly, but where I see the shadows being very dark within the portrait, especially in the eyes, in the brows, the nostrils, and also in the crevices in the mouth. Now with each layer of color, I'm adding more white. And this acts as a blender. It blends the color and it fills in the surfaces of the paper. Now at this point, I am no longer using the model, and I am finishing the drawing using a photographic reference. Now as you can see, I'm now addressing the hair. I'm drawing it with black, and I'm going in the direction of the strands of hair. I'm also making sure that my point is sharp in order to address each single strand. At this point, I am now addressing the background. Now, in the background, I'm using vine charcoal, which is normally not used with color pencil, but just to give the background a tone, I made use of the charcoal to give the background a very soft, blended tone as to not distract from the texture and the detail of the portrait. I am now adding more layers of color with sienna brown. I'm also intensifying my pressure with that same color. I am also using dark brown and also adding more pressure on top of the sienna brown, especially in the neck area. I'm adding dark brown in the shadow shapes of the face, near her chin and jawline, and also in the cast shadow of the nose. also adding more white on top of the layers of color in order to smooth and blend the surface of the portrait, especially in the flesh tone. I am also adding more color in the shadow shapes. I'm incorporating oranges and reds. I am also adding highlights in the hair with the use of white. I'm exercising caution here because if you add too much white in the hair, it ends up looking like gray hair. So I really need to make sure that I'm matching the correct shadow shapes and the correct highlights within the hair. And this concludes the recording. Thank you for watching.